Hi, we're Mike and Mitzi Fountain, and we want to welcome you to our channel for New Way Ministries.
And we're here to encourage you in your relationships by providing biblical truths on how to live and glorify the Lord.
In our last video, we talked about a type of honesty called hurtful honesty, and not a healthy type of honesty, and not a true type of honesty, but just a form of using your words to tear down people, to tear your spouse down. And today we want to talk about a second type of honesty that's not a good type of honesty either. It's hiding honesty. And it makes me think of the game hide and seek when we were little kids and we all played hide and seek, and nobody wanted to be found. In fact, I never wanted to be it. I never wanted to be the seeker. I wanted to be the one that would hide. And everybody would scatter and they would all find what they thought was a perfect place to hide. And I remember I always used to like going under beds because it was dark and I didn't think that anybody could find me. And there were always those kids who were great at hiding, and even after the game was over, they would yell, "All right, game over!" But that person would stay hidden, and they would have stayed hidden for hours if somebody hadn't gone to find them. And so that same type of hiding can happen in marriage where you don't want to be discovered. What does that look like?
Yeah, this one is probably even more prevalent, especially in Christian marriages where couples will begin to have a total lack of communication. Where we address the other side, where we will be hurtful, everything will come out, and do that kind of honesty. But this is hiding, where we actually shut down our communication. And this usually will happen over years of time, many times decades in marriages. But you can start to see hints of it, and you want to address those things as quickly as you can so that they don't become a long-term issue.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we do is we begin to put masks on, like when you're hiding from somebody and you don't want them to see who the real you is, and you don't want them to see the hurt that you're feeling, maybe that they've offended you in a certain way, and you don't want to let them know. You put on a mask and you hide behind a mask, but that's not the way we should live either. I think about the verse in 1 John 1, 6 and 7. And it says, if we claim to have fellowship with one another, with Him, and yet walk in darkness, we lie and do not live out the truth. And so there is a concept where we ignore the real issues. We don't walk in the truth. We walk in lies because we put that mask off. And then that verse finishes off by saying, but if we walk in the light, as He is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, His Son, purifies us from all sin. So that idea of a husband who is hiding himself from his wife, or the wife is hiding herself and her true feelings from the husband, it manifests itself in several ways. What do those ways look like?
Yeah, so keep in mind that the things I'm going to share, there's different tendencies or extremes to this. You may see hints and glimpses of it in your marriage. You may have seen this for years, as I mentioned before. So some of those things would be, you basically start to begin to live like roommates. You have conversations, but you don't have heartfelt conversations. You begin to have this maybe even underlying issue of resentment because of things that have been unmet, needs you feel that should have been met in your marriage. You will likely keep up the appearance as being a healthy couple in your marriage outside the home, but then have a miserable marriage inside the home. You may start to be filling your time with hobbies. You spend extended time on the television. You may even sit in front of the television together, but there's no communication of true value.
Yeah, I think we've seen that in a lot of couples before where when a husband comes home from work and he's worked all day, and instead of sitting down at a table to eat supper with the family and having conversation and talking, he grabs a remote and he turns on the TV, or he sits down with a laptop, and this can be the wife too, and you open the laptop up and you go to social media, and then you spend hours there for the rest of the night just ignoring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you begin to fill your time with anything that will avoid communication. Because one of the lies that we will believe is it's better to not address things because it will cause conflict in the marriage. well, those things unaddressed over periods of time will deepen resentment or bitterness or anger and even be harder to dig out of. So you want to get those things dealt with. Another issue, another signal that you're hiding is your children become the priority over the marriage. And you focus on their activities, you leave the marriage issues unaddressed, but you'll discuss issues concerning the children before you will discuss the marriage issues. Sometimes you may start hiding from the spouse, and the other spouse is wanting to discuss issues in the marriage. So it may be just one of you in the marriage is wanting to hide, and there's some things that are being ignored in one spouse over the other.
Right.
So those are some things, as well as hiding sin in the marriage.
Yeah, and the hiding sin is, I know in our marriage, we've been there where I've had times where I had refused to acknowledge to Mitzi that I was struggling with a sin, and I had refused to acknowledge to anybody that I was struggling with. So I just kept that as a secret sin. And so that was the way that I wasn't being honest with you, and by not telling you where I was. So if we go back to that verse we were talking about in 1 John about walking in the light and knowing when we're in the light versus being hidden in the dark, what are some questions we could ask ourselves to know? And so I think one of the questions we could ask is, when was the last time you talked about spiritual things with your spouse? As we've said before, that as a believer, if you and your spouse are believers, Christians, everything revolves around our walk with the Lord, and that includes your marriage, that includes your conversation. So how often do you talk about real spiritual things? And so another question is, when and how often do you talk about marital issues, the things that couples, for as long as they're going to be married, are going to face issues? It's not something that you, as we've said before, you grow out of. How often do you talk about those hard things? Are you willing to in a gentle way, not in a hurtful way as we talked about in the first video, but in a gentle way, are you willing to bring up an issue and talk about it? And those aren't easy things to do. A third question is, do you not only hide from your spouse all these issues, do you hide other issues as well? Do you put a mask on? Does your spouse know the real you? Do they know your heart? Do they know what you're feeling? So I think if you are willing to ask yourself these questions, they'll reveal where your heart is, and they'll reveal, are you being honest with your spouse and in your relationship and with others? And as we want to encourage you again, maybe you are one who hides. Maybe you are non-confrontational. Maybe you don't want to discuss the issues. This is a hard place to be, because it leaves you alone. It leaves you, as in the game hide and seek, it leaves you in a place where nobody knows where you are, and you're left to yourself and your thoughts, and you really need to involve others. So we would encourage you, take that hard step and reach out to somebody. And even if it's not your spouse at first, reach out to a friend, reach out to someone, and just reveal to them where your heart is. And then that first step will lead to another step, into another step. So we hope you'll join us in our third video, where we discuss a healthy way of being honest with our spouse. We believe it's the biblical way. So thank you for joining us today for this video, and we look forward to seeing you next time.